Good afternoon, members, and to the viewing public. Sarge, before we begin, can you swear in our Secretary of Finance, please? Thank you.
Please raise your right hand and repeat after me. I state your name,
I, David Attelig,
do solemnly swear,
under the penalty of perjury,
that the testimony
that the testimony
you shall give
I shall give
in the matter at hand
in the matter at hand
shall be the truth,
shall be the truth,
the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
and nothing but the truth.
So help me God.
So help me God.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. And just for the record, we are back from recess from August 10th. It's a continuation because of different times and meetings by all the witnesses. So we are back, and we still have quorum. And just for the record, I'll state out all the members that are present. First, to my left, Vice Chair Larry Guerrero is present. Floor Leader is present. Representative Castro is present. Representative Donald Manglonia is present. Representative Edmund Villagomez is present. Representative Tina Sablan is present. And our Minority Leader is present. And so we begin. And Mr. Secretary, you know why you're here. Last week there was we were conducting an investigation, and apparently the information that was sent to us had redactions of information on it. So this is why you're here. And for the record, please state your name and position.
Thank you, Chairman and members of this committee. My name is David Attelig. I'm the Secretary of Finance.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary of Finance. And how long have you held the position? Is it over a year already, or?
Yes, it has. I was confirmed in April of 2019.
2019. And under your time as Secretary of Finance, have you experienced the process of the OGA and requesting information from any person or body?
Yes, sir.
Yes, you do. Okay, thank you. And with that, I'll open it up to the members, and I'll first recognize Rep. Probst.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary, for coming in today and joining us. We appreciate you once again coming in and making your time. I often wonder, you probably are the busiest person on Saipan, because I imagine people are either hitting you up for money or for information. So the good news is we're not going to hit you up for money. But thank you again. My first question, Secretary, is since you've been Secretary, do you roughly know how many Open Government Act requests you've received thus far? Is it a lot, or?
It is a handful. I've received OGAs from private citizens, companies, as well as this body or members of this body, and OPA.
Thank you. My next question is, aside from us, from this body, is this the only legislative subpoena that you've received? And I guess that would be a yes, since the Senate hasn't. Is that correct?
Yes, as
Okay.
far as subpoena is concerned. I've been invited many times, but not
Okay.
subpoenaed.
All right. But you've been requested for all kinds of information, and you've always been candid in coming in several times. For finance, what is the process in handling an Open Government Act request? So, like, once it comes in, does it go to you, and then do you assign it, or how does that process take place?
Usually all requests should be coming to my office, and when I receive the request, depending on what the request is, I assign it to the appropriate divisions that is with the information, and I request that the division gather the data or the information for my review prior to releasing it within the 10 days allowed to me.
So that process would be the same for our legislative requests as well, pretty
That's
much?
correct.
Okay, goes to you. Okay, just a few more questions. Um, Is there, is there any standard procedure or a policy for when there is confidential information for redacting, redaction of documents? Is there something in your, like for finance, do you guys have a standard operating procedure for that you practice, or how is that addressed?
Thank you for that question. We do not have anything written in any standard procedure. We follow what the OGA law requires for. As far as redaction, obviously, we do have policies, especially pertaining to taxpayers, in terms of the release or the confidentiality of protecting taxpayers' information, which includes also personal information.
Did you or any of your finance staff consult with legal counsel about how to handle the OGA requests that you received from the minority back in December? Or did you just did it how you normally would do it?
No, we forward all information, all OGAs. I forward a copy to the AG's office to get basically a clearance if this is information that is not in any of the local courts, because if any information requested is part of a current case, we are not to release that information.
Okay. And with regard to the legislative subpoena, did you seek legal counsel or counsel for that when you received
Yes,
that?
I did.
Okay. All right. Does finance have an established procedure or policy with regard to responding to subpoenas?
No, I don't think that is a normal situation
Right.
at finance, but no, there is nothing in writing or a procedure handling subpoenas.
So in that instance, as you said, you went through the Office of the Attorney General. You have, do you have somebody assigned to finance to assist you?
At the time, we only have an AAG assigned to us for rev and tax. It's a tax attorney.
Okay. But would you use that counsel for information, or do you seek other counsel?
I do seek our AAG assigned to us to rev and tax for other legal questions that I may have, and then I also seek the AG's office.
Okay. I'll wrap it up, sorry. How, sorry. Did you consult with anyone about how to handle this OGA request? Like, aside from the, I mean, like, did you consult with the governor's legal counsel or the governor or lieutenant governor, anyone with regard to this?
Yes, we did have communication with the governor's legal counsel as well as the AG's office.
Okay. All right. Thank you for your time. I yield, Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Probst. I recognize the Vice Chair.
Thank you, Chairman. Secretary Atalik, welcome. We appreciate you showing up to today's meeting. Last week, when Director of Administrative Services of Finance, Bert Torres, I asked her about a question, and this is in regard to, and then going back again, follow up in regards to redaction procedures. And I did ask her if, she thinks that personnel that deals with documents, such as from finance or any departments that are confidential documents, and in regards to redacting certain informations, personal information such as names, social security numbers, credit card numbers, and so forth. I asked her if she thinks that her and her personnel and some other staff within the government would indicate or show interest in receiving training in reduction procedures. And I'm glad that Rep. Props also asked you in regards to subpoena procedures. I think these are things that your department should be thinking forth in getting briefings or get familiarization with the laws, state laws, and even federal laws, because I think we're getting out of hand in what documents can be redacted and what information cannot be redacted. And Madame Torres, I asked her yes or no question, and she said yes, that they would appreciate if they can receive additional training or briefing on the redaction laws. And I really appreciate it because she indicated that it would be of best interest for personnel that deals with documents, confidential documents. On another note, she submitted a statement and noted that a citizen requested a Open Government Act request for documents on June 17, 2019. And that citizen did receive the documents relating to Governor Torres's travels and reimbursements. It's very concerned that when that citizen received the documents were not redacted. And then forthcoming additional requests for under OGA, some of the information were redacted. As citizen, we don't know who that person is. They received the documents from finance, and sooner or later, it leaked out to the media. It leaked out to the media. What is the purpose? I'm not sure. What is the purpose? Is it just to show the people, what the governor had claimed for reimbursements? What were his travel activities? A particular citizen, and I would like, if you can, give us additional information in regards to this citizen that requested pertinent documents and abruptly sends it out to the media. So,
Point of order.
Mr. Secretary, can
Mr.
you
Chairman.
please,
Point
can
of
you
order.
please,
Wait, hold on. Sorry,
I have the floor.
we're not in session, so there's no point in order. He has the
Our
floor.
rules apply, and points
I
of
have
order
a-
can be raised, and I should be recognized under our rules.
Mr. Chairman, can we allow the witness to answer the question posed by our vice
Point
chair?
of
Thank
order,
you,
Mr.
Chairman.
Chairman.
So my question, Mr.
Order.
Secretary, is can you,
Order. Vice. Council. Recess, John? We're asking. Thank you, we're back from recess, and I'll recognize Rep. Sablon for her point of order.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So once again, I'd like to reiterate that there is a question about the relevance of the Vice Speaker's line of questioning. What does the identity of an OGA requester have to do with our work in this committee? And how does this have any impact at all on finance's ability to respond to legislative requests for information or to the Open Government Act request that the minority members submitted back in December? And I would also say for the record that I think it is highly inappropriate for any member of this body to make any assumptions or claims about the motivations of any private citizen who requests, as is his or her right, access to public records, and also to make claims about whether or not information, which is public record, was leaked to the media. That has no bearing at all on the investigative work of this committee. And I'd like to ask our legal counsel to weigh in on this. You know, I am concerned that there is going to be now pressure on this witness to disclose the identity of the original OGA requester, the identity of which is not relevant, but also in the absence of any legal counsel for finance. So legal counsel, if you could please provide us some guidance.
I believe the witness is obligated to respond to any questions regarding the subpoena that was submitted to him, and he's here. And the scope of the questions should be strictly limited to the scope of the subpoena. If the subpoena doesn't cover the Vice Speaker's line of questioning, I believe those questions would be out of bounds. If the questions are within the subpoena, then I believe he should be responsive. Does that answer your question?
And are the questions within the scope of the subpoena, counsel?
I do not believe that the Vice Speaker's questions are within the scope of the subpoena.
And could you just, for the record, restate the scope of the subpoena?
The subpoena has basically one major area, all records, and their subcategories, all records that the Department of Finance has not previously submitted to the members of the House of Representatives pursuant to an Open Government Act letter of request addressed to the Secretary dated December 10, 2019, including but not limited to the following. And then there's subcategories. Any and all records related to first class, business class travel, etc. B, any and all redacted records showing credit card or bank information submitted by the governor. C, any and all records related to expenses paid by the Commonwealth government for executive security, etc. And D, any and all records relating to the housing and utility expenses paid by the Commonwealth government for the governor. I do not see the identity of a requester for an OGA being covered within the scope of those things that I just read off.
Point of clarification, Mr. Chairman, to the legal counsel.
Go ahead.
Legal counsel, when we deliberated last week, most of, or almost all members here in this committee had concurred that the same OJ request that the minority bloc requested are the same documents that this citizen requested on June 17. That's part of the record on last week's proceedings. So by having it on record, and members are connecting that it's the same document, that's why we're arguing why the citizen that requested wasn't redacted, and the request that the minority bloc got, which is the same document, is redacted. So do you think there's relevance there? Legal counsel?
I don't. The identity could be me, could be you, could be Donald Trump. It doesn't matter who the identity, as long as it's not a person sitting in this committee that has a conflict, perhaps. I don't even know if that would be a conflict. These documents are public records. If you want to
understand.
make the argument and convince your colleagues that it's relevant, then you're free to
I'm
do so.
asking you, legal counsel, because you're kind of concluding that there's no relevance. And some of the members last week alluded that these are the same documents that was requested by a citizen
Right.
in
So
June 17. The argument is that document was not redacted then, now it's redacted. We're talking about the same document. How could we hold the Vice Speaker's question against? I'm sure there's relevance. It's the same document we're talking about. Do you agree?
no, I disagree. Sorry, sir. You can disagree with me. We'll respect each other, but I don't see the relevance. You want to make the argument that it's relevant and then proceed with your questioning?
I'm
can do
asking
that.
you based on the proceedings and what was stated on record on last week's proceedings, that they connected by their arguments that this is the same documents. So you don't, as a legal counsel, you don't see that it's relevant to ask that question.
I haven't heard.
After members went on record last week.
I haven't heard anything. I've been here. I've been.
Jesus Christ. Ayun, Mr. Chairman.
Vice.
Thank you, Chair. Counsel, you're saying that my line of question has no relevancy to the scope of today's meeting with Secretary of Finance, Mr. Attling. Let me express upon myself why I'm asking this question. There is relevancy to that question. Why? Because we have a huge problem with redaction procedures. That is the point I'm trying to get at. The initial documents that were submitted were not redacted. Subsequent requests were redacted. That is the relevancy of my question. We are here investigating expenses. We are here to report our investigation, whether there are activities that were committed against rules and regulations, laws, whatever you call it. And also, at the end of this committee, is to report and make recommendations to the government. And in particular, at this point, is the redaction of documents. And I'm glad Mr. Secretary concurred that every government that deals with documents that has personal information, that they need to know the redaction procedures, subpoena procedures. We need to establish standing operating procedures within departments, within divisions, within ourselves in this House. And we do have rules and regulations. So, Chairman, colleagues, Council, my line of question do have relevancy to the scope of work of today's testimonial from the Finance Secretary. Thank you. Are you?
Thank you, Chair. Rep. Sablan, are you satisfied with the comment?
I don't know what you mean by satisfied, Mr. Chairman, but I do appreciate Council's guidance in this case, in this matter, and I continue to disagree that the identity of the requester at this time anyway is relevant to the scope of the subpoena. But I also want to acknowledge the Vice Speaker's concerns as well as the floor leader's concerns about getting, if your interest is in validating the unredacted records that we know are out there and validating that they are the same records that finance physically altered, then I do see that could be useful and important for this committee to be able to do. And in that case, I would submit that it would be helpful to call in the witness and obtain access to those records officially with some kind of attestation or affidavit. So I understand what you're getting at, Mr. Vice Speaker. I don't think we should be making any claims about the motives. I think that's highly inappropriate. Um, but but what I would ask at this point is how do we resolve this? I mean, we could come back to this question, consult further with legal counsel about steps forward, the steps that we should take going forward in order to validate these records that are unredacted, that are in the possession of a private citizen. Um, and for now, let the issue lie until we have that clarification about how we do that.
Thank you, Rep. Salon. Council and clerk, please make a note of that. That question will stay on the table for further deliberation, I guess, on the procedures moving forward. For now, we have a witness that's here to answer questions in this committee, and if that's okay with the vice, we can come back to this question, maybe through an executive session where a private citizen's name might come out or so forth. Okay? Okay.
So you're saying my line of question will stay until further discussion?
Yeah.
Okay.
Until maybe
I can
not
agree with that, Chair. Thank you.
open, since it's an OGA and a person's name has to be protected for now. But we'll get back on the most likely in an executive session so that it will be just us, and then we'll go from there. Okay? Is that okay?
Sure, Chair.
Okay. Chair recognizes Rep. Villagomez.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Atolik, thank you again for your presence. Just a couple questions. Did you receive any instructions as to how to, or communication from anyone, as to how to handle the OGA request and the legislative subpoena?
Of the legislative subpoena?
And the OGA request.
Okay.
Both, yeah.
Excuse me, if you're speaking in terms of the OJ request, I did seek legal counsel and was informed to redact any personal information. Normally on records that we receive in other divisions, revenue tax, excise tax, customs, we do not release any information regardless unless it's subpoenaed, and then we also have legal counsel look at that. In terms of regular OGAs to my office for information like what we're discussing, yes, we do seek legal counsel just to ensure and make sure that what we release is not in any violation of any current court order as stated in the OGA law.
Okay, so basically, when you received the request, you took it upon yourself to get that advice, and nobody else actually approached you and gave you instructions as to how to handle these requests.
That's correct.
Thank you. Upon our receiving the minorities OGA requests back in December, can you give us a step-by-step as to how you prepared those information for us?
So when I received the request from the minority bloc, I did forward that information to legal counsel, asked to ensure, to inform them that there is an OGA request. I started asking the staff to prepare all the documents, get all the documents requested. The list of documents requested was enormous, as you probably can see, and you have. And so I tasked the Division of Finance and Accounting as well as Administrative Services to work together to get the documents necessary. Upon a few days into the 10-day time period I have for OGA requests, we knew that the request was not going to be able to be submitted in time within 10 days, so we requested for an extension. We were granted extension, and then we still, unfortunately, did not have all the requested information available because of some the manual process that we have at finance. We had to actually physically look at travel on, just basically go to each travel record that we had. One of the requests was all travel that was in first class or higher than economy. We don't know that. There's nothing in there. I can't pull up in the system and say, let me have all first class travel, and boom, there I have it. We had to go to each TA that we have on file and look, open it up, look. Next one, look. And how many travels we had in the last, since 2014. And so went back, some shared with the minority. I don't think we're going to have, we still probably need another extension, and invited them to come and look. And please, we want to, we're trying to be open, trying to share. We're not trying to hold any information. We want to comply to the OGA. And so after a couple of meetings also with the minority bloc, sharing them, showing them where you can look at them as we're still compiling. Then I believe after a while, it was agreed that we'll submit whatever we have, and there were still some pending documents that we're still searching for and looking for. And started to continue to look at that. As we know, after January, February, we got into this pandemic and lack of staff. We kind of almost out of sight, out of mind, I'll be honest. And so until this legislative body committee asked for and summoned for those documents, so we looked at what you guys have what the body has published on Google Drive, and looked and see what you had and what we had, and to make sure that what basically reconcile what's on your list and what we have gathered, and then that's what we submitted based on the summoned request for documents. And I hope that answered your question.
Yes, thank you. Okay, my next question is, did you delegate the handling of the legislative subpoena, or did you take it upon yourself to, or your office mainly, to handle that request?
The request was to my office, so yes,
No, but, okay, I guess what I'm trying to say is, did you take it upon yourself to take the lead on this, or did you delegate the work to?
Oh,
yeah.
I know. I don't have time to pull out records, and I don't even know where the records are. So I did delegate that to administrative services manager to look in and get the whole team together to get and gather the data. We had 5 people working on this request, almost full time, just to try to meet the deadlines.
Thank you. Was there any training provided for the staff to handle, OGA requests for?
I do not think so.
Are you familiar with the Open Government Act? General?
I am.
Okay. So are you aware that the OGA requires that any records redacted or withheld should be accompanied by an explanation under 1 CMC 9918 subsection D, or D, agency responses refusing in whole or in part inspection of any public record shall include a statement of the specific exemption authorizing the withholding of the record or part thereof, and a brief explanation of how the exemption applies to the record withheld. Did you or anyone in your staff prepare any such statement?
We did for the summoned request for the documents. I do not think we did so to the original request from the minority bloc.
Can you elaborate as to why not?
I wasn't as clear on that, and not feeling withholding information. I think I wasn't aware of certifying, saying why we're redacting till after we got information on the summon documents.
Okay. My last question is, to your knowledge, has anyone at finance ever prepared a statement of a specific exemption under 1 CMC 9918D in response to an OGA request?
In the past, I'm not aware.
All right, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I yield.
Thank you, Rep. Villagomez. Rep. Donald.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good afternoon, Secretary. Have you ever been contacted by the Governor's Legal Counsel, Mr. Gil Bernbrick, about any legal matter?
Any legal matter? Of course, I would lean to him for legal requests. I always, as a practice, my practice is I forward him legal requests for clarification, as well as the AG, as well as my tax attorney.
Based on your knowledge regarding your staff, do you know if any of them have been contacted directly by the Governor's Legal Counsel about
Yes.
any legal matter?
I don't know what you mean by legal matter, but if it's relating to the OGA, yes. Legal counsel Bryn Birch was in contact with my office, with Bert, Margaret Torres, and I was aware of that.
Any other matter aside from the OGA request?
Nothing to my knowledge.
Thank you. Are you aware that Mr. Bernbrick directly contact Ms. Bertha regarding the release of the records relating to the governor's expenditures?
Yes, I was aware he was going to do that.
Were you concerned?
No? Is there a reason for me to be?
Well, I mean, are you aware that Mr. Bernbrick is the governor's legal counsel and not Department of Finance?
You know, I view him as, yes, he is the governor's legal counsel, but he has also made himself available to the executive branch, which I'm a part of.
So would you say that it's a normal course of business for finance to receive legal advice from attorneys that are not finance's legal counsel?
If it's a legal matter in terms of a summons or a court, I can see where you're coming from, but I get legal opinion and requests, or it's not an official legal opinion, but I get legal advice out of a courtesy request. Nothing to use it as a basis of decisions in terms of pertaining to a court or this body.
Thank you. In regards to that question, legal advice, not assigned, we did discuss that last week. And for the record, Mr. Bernrick did stated that the advices that he submits is considered friendly advice. So there's counsel, there's nothing
Yes,
wrong.
but I wanted to hear from...
And there's nothing wrong giving friendly advices within a government agency. We did discuss that last week. So
Point of information.
I don't know, Rep, what you're trying to get to.
Rep. Solan.
I would take issue with the statement that there is nothing wrong with legal counsel providing advice to people or agencies that are not their clients. That actually runs counter to the model rules that govern attorneys. And also, there is the problem, which I think Rep. Manglonia is getting to, which is that the Department of Finance's interests may actually conflict with the governor's interests. And so, yes, there is a problem. And I think that Rep. Manglonia should be allowed to continue with his line
Point
of
of
questioning.
information, Mr. Chairman.
Okay.
Last week, Mr. Bernbridge also stated that the governor is his client, and therefore, after the information disseminated to the media, he asked that job to protect personal information for his clientele. Just want to state that for the record too as well.
Thank you, Floor.
And another point of information, Mr. Chairman, is that based on the governor's legal counsel's advice, the staff of finance physically doctored their own original records, and that led us to this problem that we have today. And so it is absolutely a relevant question to be asking the Secretary of Finance, because Ms. Torres was not able to answer all of our questions about exactly how finance came to physically alter their own records that we requested based on advice of an attorney who is not even their counsel. Thank you.
Thank you, Rep. Sablan. Point, note taken. Continue, Rep. Manglona.
Thank you, Chair. So did you even consider at that point that the legal counsel for the Office of the Governor has an interest in protecting his client?
I think that's obvious.
So that's a
Representative.
yes. All right.
Yes.
And last one. Were you aware that after receiving the advice from Mr. Bernberg, that your staff went to physically redact the original records in Finance's custody?
I didn't know at the time it was going to be on the original documents. However, after receiving the summons, that's when I learned that it was on the original documents.
Thank you. I yield for now, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Rep. Manglona. Anyone? Rep. Sablan, Floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for coming, Mr. Secretary Atalik. To your recollection, Mr. Secretary, the OJ request by the minority on December 10, to your recollection, was it the same request as the citizen on June 17?
Yes, it was.
Practically everything is the same request.
Pretty much.
Thank you. And to your recollection, the December 10 request by the minority bloc, because it was mentioned last week on our previous proceedings that the request wasn't completed, but to your recollection, are they all completed? The requests that were made by the minority bloc?
Yes, with the summons for the rest of the documents, we feel it is completed. I do hear and I do recall from this body or this committee that there's known information missing, but I'm not aware of that. And if it is, I'll be glad to comply and get those records if I know the details of what you're looking for.
Thank you for that response. Mr. Secretary, on every request for OJ, not only from the minority or any citizen, how much time does it take actually? Does it depend on the magnitude of documents requested? What is, let's use the minority bloc's request. It took you quite a while because there are extensive requests of documents. Is that correct?
That is very correct. Just for the minority box requests, it took us, actually, I mean, we had 5 people working on it, trying to meet the deadline, not including staff at the travel section and at the finance and accounting.
So within the Department of Finance, with requests, which division screens, or is there any SOP on reimbursements? Is there a specific division in your department that screens reimbursements?
Yeah, finance and accounting reviews requests for reimbursements. Obviously, what's allowable for reimbursements in terms of official representation, like we're talking about with the governor and the lieutenant governor, those are the only 2 that are allowed to have those, other than actual reimbursements for something that employees of the government was aware of purchasing something for the office and they're requesting for reimbursements, but nothing for only for like a true office supply or nothing else.
or public purpose. Is that correct?
Definitely public purpose.
So
yes.
if finance and accounting is the division that screens or all reimbursement requests, does that end there or it goes to you for approval? What's
It-
the procedure, the
If,
standard
if,
procedure?
if there's, all the requests will go to finance and accounting. They review them, ensure that the request obviously is legal and allowable. And then they also verify if funds is available and that account being requested to be reimbursed from has funding available. And if there's no funding available or they feel it's deemed unallowable, they will inform my office.
Thank you for the response. So my last question, is there any pending OJ Act right now before you to whoever requests? Is there any pending, to your knowledge, in your table, OJ requests for documents?
No, there's no,
Not to your knowledge right now.
right now, no.
So you have already distributed whatever was requested. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield for now.
Thank you, Mr. Flor. Anyone else? Rep. Sablan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and good afternoon, Mr. Secretary. Do you have the two Open Government Act requests that you received with you today?
I do not.
So you're not able to compare them side by side right now?
No.
Okay. So you don't know for sure that the minority's request was exactly the same as the private citizen's request 6 months before?
I said it's pretty much the same. I think yours is actually way more.
More comprehensive, right? Because it took you much longer to gather the records that we requested. Otherwise, it shouldn't have taken so long because the records would have been compiled already, right?
That's correct.
Okay, thank you. And just for the record, we did provide our request to Ms. Torres, Ms. Bertha Torres, when she was here, for the additional records that we believe this committee, that would be responsive to this committee's request. And so she should have that with her and turn that over to the committee soon. And just following on the questions of my colleagues here earlier, did you consider, Mr. Secretary, that the Office of the Governor may have conflicting interests with the Department of Finance?
No.
Why not?
I sought legal counsel. The governor the Department of Finance is under the governor's office, executive branch.
Sure, but you also have an obligation as an agency head to comply with the law, specifically with the Open Government Act, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And the governor's interests in releasing records may not be, or withholding records for that matter, may not be the same as finance's interest in complying with the Open Government Act or with the legislative request for information. Would you acknowledge that?
We are mandated also with disclosure rules and regulations, standards for taxpayers and information from our office. So we are familiar with the of ensuring that we do not give out personal information.
Understood, understood. But the question generally is that the governor's interests may not be the same. Would you agree with that statement? May not be the same as the Department of Finance's interests.
I can't answer that. I don't know.
Okay.
I mean,
Is that a question you've ever raised with legal counsel?
I raise with legal counsel what is being requested in OGAs. I share that with the legal counsel.
And who is the legal counsel that you consult with for finance with respect to this particular Open Government Act request from the minority?
The AG himself.
The Attorney General, Edward Manibusa?
That's correct.
Okay. And so you said that he provided you some guidance in terms of how to comply with the minority's Open Government Act request?
He just ensured make sure that personal information is redacted.
Did he tell you what personal information specifically?
Yes, any credit card information, any personal information. If they give a bank statement, redact the address, the credit card information.
Did he
And
say,
any charges that is not related to the to the request for reimbursement.
Okay, and did he say any credit card information, including the last four digits that appear on the governor's receipts for reimbursement?
He didn't say including the last four digits, just says credit card information.
Do you see the last four digits that appear on receipts as being confidential information?
If the full credit card information is redacted or hidden, it is not.
Okay. So the governor's legal counsel, Mr. Burnbrick, also said that he did not view the last four digits as being confidential information. And it sounds like you agree with that. Are you aware that your staff continued to physically alter the original records to remove the last four digits of credit card numbers appearing on the governor's receipts?
Yes, that's what I learned. I unfortunately assumed that, to leave the last four digits is okay.
So you never communicated with your staff about leaving the last four digits prior to them actually redacting?
I did not.
Did you know that the minority specifically requested that the last four digits not be redacted when when your staff were still collecting the records? Back in January when we met, we specifically asked that those last four digits not be redacted.
Oh, I wasn't aware.
You were not aware. Okay. And Mr. Burnbrick is just the governor's legal counsel, correct? He's not finance's legal counsel?
That's correct.
Okay. And he has provided you with advice before?
As mentioned, they're friendly advice.
Uh-huh. And in the case of this Open Government Act request, what was the nature of his communication with you?
Likewise with the AG is to ensure that personal information is redacted.
And did he tell you specifically what personal information to redact?
No, nothing specific. Just credit card information. I mean, we all know what was the personal information we're talking about. We don't have to spell it out. It wasn't spelled out.
Well, I think that's what the problem is, right?
I think so.
Is that we asked for the last four credit card numbers, which now everybody agrees is not confidential, not to be redacted, and then they were, based on that advice.
Yeah, I apologize. My staff were the one that did it, and they thought that was the information they needed to redact. They weren't specifically told. You mentioned you shared with them, but I wasn't aware.
Did you know that your staff were going to physically alter the original records in finance's custody?
No, I just learned of that after when we got the summons.
And so you talked with them about the physical redaction of the original records?
When we got the summons, yes, and I was informed that they did it on the original. I was surprised and said, well, we need to make a statement and explain what happened.
You were surprised. Did they tell you why they physically redacted the originals?
No, they just said they redacted information and it was on the original that they redacted. And yes, I was surprised because I assumed that it was going to be, you make copies and you redact the copies that you submit.
Were you concerned when you heard that they redacted the originals?
I was concerned, yes.
And why were you concerned?
Likewise, the last four digits is not considered confidential, just like the last four digits of a social security number is not confidential. And so I explained that, and they were apologetic. They weren't aware. We had 5 people going through every document to ensure that things were redacted, they were instructed to redact, which is personal information. And some apparently used their own assumption on what is personal information and redacted what they redacted.
Okay.
Rep Solan?
Yes.
Just one moment, because you're over time. Uh, Before I recognize you for the
Sure,
second round,
I yield.
let me ask Rep Castro for the first round before, if you have any question. Okay. Okay. For the second round, Rep Sablan, you may continue.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So, Mr. Secretary, you were quoted last month in local media stating that you would release the governor's unredacted records upon receiving, including credit card numbers, upon receiving a subpoena or if taken to court. So was that an accurate quote? And were you just not aware at the time that those original records had actually been altered?
That was the truth.
Yeah.
I did not know that they redacted the original. So when we did get the summons, I asked them to prepare the requests. And when I was informed that it was the originals that were redacted, as you repeated, I was surprised.
Okay. To your knowledge, has finance ever physically altered the original records in its custody after receiving an Open Government Act request?
Not to my knowledge.
Okay. Are there any copies of the unredacted records in finance's custody? Have they ever been scanned? Are they on a server somewhere? Or have all those records been physically altered?
Some are on a scanned server, but from my understanding, everything that was received was provided.
Okay. So some of these records might still be preserved then electronically?
Yes.
Okay. Well, that's reassuring to hear. Are there any credit cards for the CNMI government that?
No, the
No.
government cannot have credit cards. It violates our Constitution.
Okay. Really?
Credit cards are considered loans, and loans are not an operational. We cannot take out loans for operations.
That is interesting. Okay. So all the cards used in the governor's reimbursement request then are personal credit cards then?
I don't know.
Okay. So finance doesn't keep on file a list of the credit card numbers that have been submitted for the governor's reimbursements?
Not to my knowledge. We don't keep anyone's list of credit cards.
Okay. So would anyone else in the government know who these various 17 or so credit card numbers belong to?
I do not know.
My last couple questions for this round, but I do have questions beyond just the redaction of records, Mr. Chairman. Actually, just one last question for this round. At any point, Mr. Secretary, did anyone communicate with you in any way, directly or indirectly, to delay the release of records, of the governor's expense records to the legislature?
No.
Thank you. I yield for now.
Thank you, Rep Sablan. Members, anyone has any questions for the Secretary of Finance? Is there none? I'm going to wrap it up. Is there an objection for Rep Sablan to continue?
No objection.
Rep Sablan, you may.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary, for your patience and your endurance. Are you familiar with Title 70, the Department of Finance's regulations for the control of public funds?
Am I familiar with it? Yes, I am.
Okay. So does Title 70 apply to all government employees?
I don't know what you mean by that question.
Do the regulations for finance apply for the control of public funds under Title 70? Do those requirements apply to all government employees,
It should.
including the governor?
Yes. Everyone, including this legislature.
Sure. And are you familiar with the definitions of public purpose as provided in Title 70?
Give me a minute, I'll pull it up.
I have a copy if you like.
Sure.
Actually, could I borrow your copy? So public purpose, the definition would be on page 4 of that document. And it really tracks with Public Law 1184 as amended by Public Law 12-2. Are you seeing it? Okay. And then you would also be familiar then, Mr. Secretary, with the definitions of personal as well as political expenditures, which you'd find in subsection P and Q on page 3 of that document.
Looking at the regulations, can you cite which particular one?
Sure, Title 70.
Yeah,
The definitions are found in,
the beginning.
yes, 70-20.110,
And the definition of
the definition of personal expenditure.
Go ahead, Mr. Secretary Kirimi.
Mr. Chairman, I'm not prepared to go through this and be questioned on this. I didn't come here prepared. I came here prepared to talk about redacted documents and also on OGA. Is there anything else that I missed on the subpoena?
Rep Saban.
Yeah, thank you. I'm not going to go, at least not at this time, into any specific legal questions or definitions, but I do just want to verify that you are familiar with Title 70 and you are familiar with the requirements that finance imposes on government officials for the expenditure of public funds.
Yeah.
Yes, you are. Okay. So, Mr. Secretary, the finance regulations do require all government officials who go on government-funded trips to provide trip reports, correct?
Yes.
Are you aware that the governor has not provided trip reports for numerous trips?
Yes, I'm aware.
Have you ever raised this issue with finance or the attorney general or with the governor?
No, but those were for a lot of trips prior to my being secretary.
And since you've been secretary, you have not raised that issue?
I have not.
Why not?
I don't know.
You don't know why you have not raised the issue?
There's no reason for me to raise the issue.
But isn't that a requirement that applies to all government officials?
I wasn't, there's nothing in my possession to question the governor on his travel. And so I don't know what is being submitted. Every travel document doesn't come to my desk. Now, all travel TA vouchers go straight to travel, and I was not informed of that.
Okay, but you do now know that there are no trip reports.
I do now know.
And then similarly, the finance regulations require complete documentation for official representation and official justification. You're aware of that?
Yes.
And at a minimum, the names and positions of persons entertained, the name and purpose of the expense and its direct relationship to the CNMI government business, the description of matters discussed, as well as original receipts and supporting documents. Those are required at a minimum for official representation. Are
Yes.
you aware? Okay. Have you personally reviewed the governor's requests for payment and reimbursement for official representation?
Since my time?
Mhm.
I review his reimbursements, and I feel those that I have approved are allowable.
Are you aware, though, that the vast majority of the payments and reimbursements and the records that finance provided do not meet these minimum requirements?
Like I said, I don't go back and review all the records in the past before my coming on board. I review what's on my desk, and those that I've approved, I deemed allowable.
But since 2019, or since you've been the secretary, are you aware that there have been numerous receipts where the names of persons who had meals or whatnot with the governor, those were not disclosed, where the nature and purpose of the expense and its relationship with CNMI government business was not disclosed, was not reported, those were approved for reimbursement?
I do not know. I don't have those documents in front of me.
Okay. Would you be concerned if that turned out to be the case, if we showed you the documents?
If I have the documents and I have time to review it, I'll be glad to answer your question.
Okay. Well, perhaps we could schedule another hearing, and we could go over those records that you've provided, Mr.
Sure.
Secretary, and show you.
Rep. Sulan, I think your time's up. You want to yield to someone?
Well,
But the line of question is because you're going back to 2018, 19. Secretary of Finance is not the current at the time.
actually, our request goes all the way through December 2019.
Okay. Well,
And-
what I'm trying to say is maybe the travel, the personnel that are in charge of that's the line of question you should ask them, not because I don't see the Secretary of Finance going through each travel document at this time. But
I understand that. I understand that. However, as the Secretary of Finance, he is constitutionally charged with monitoring and controlling the expenditure of public funds. And in his capacity, he signs off on all of these approvals.
I understand. And because of our time, I want to have other members ask, unless we ask the.
Sure, I can yield for now, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Okay, members. Before, is it still a long line of questionings? A few more. Is there an objections? We have a few more questions from Rep. Sablan. No objection. Thank you. Rep. Sablan, you may.
A point of clarification before that, Mr.
Sure.
Chairman, please.
Floor.
Legal counsel, I know that the majority of the members have no objection, but in our rules, how many rounds of questioning do we have? Just so that we can state it for the
I
record.
think the default is 2, unless the chairman determines otherwise.
Thank you for letting that for the record. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Floor. Rep. Sablan, you may.
Thank you. So on official representation and justification, so Title 70 requires, Mr. Secretary, that government officials fill out these OR and justification documentation forms, and further, that no substitute form will be accepted. Are you aware of that requirement? I can point you to it. On page 7, so Title 70-20.1-125.
Okay, what's your question?
Are you aware that Title 70 requires government officials to use the official representation and justification documentation forms prescribed by finance, and that no substitute forms will be accepted?
It also says that time and time can be modified and amended by the Secretary of Finance.
And have you amended or modified?
I have not.
Okay. Are you aware that the governor has not used finance's OR and justification forms?
I will have to get back to you on that.
Okay. It's not in any of the records that you've provided for the record.
Okay.
So Title 70 also provides that unallowable or undocumented official representation and other expenditures will not be reimbursed or paid by the CNMI government. has finance or the Attorney General ever raised any of these issues regarding the official representation expenses of the governor?
I am not aware of any.
Okay. Are you familiar? So now moving on from OR, the subject of first class, business class, and premium class travel. Are you familiar, Mr. Secretary, with Public Law 1586?
I am.
So you know then that government-funded first class, business class, and other premium class travel is prohibited.
Yes,
Are you aware that the governor has made such trips?
I am aware.
Are you aware that the First Lady has also made first class, business class, and premium class trips?
I'm aware.
Could you explain how this happens?
I don't know what happened. It wasn't during my time.
You're saying that the governor never made any first class, business class, or premium class trips in 2019?
I'm not aware of any trips that he took that I approved.
Okay.
I stand to be corrected, but I'm aware of their travel.
But you don't review all the travel records that
No.
come through finance. Somebody else does.
I mean, I don't, yeah.
Okay.
If the only time I review travel authorizations is when they're within 2 weeks of the trip commencing. If it's prior to 2 weeks, because within 2 weeks it needs the Secretary of Finance signature.
Sure.
Otherwise, it goes through the normal process, and my travel section handles that.
Okay, and your travel section has never flagged for you as a secretary, like, hey, this first class trip is being requested?
No,
Okay, so that's never been raised
No.
since you've been secretary? Okay. Is the First Lady a government employee?
she is not.
Are you aware that Title 70 prohibits the use of government funds to pay for travel for non-government employees?
That's incorrect. We've paid for non-government employees like trainers, consultants, people that come. We pay for that.
I can point you to page 5. So this would be, page 5 of the document, Part 100, Official Representation Expenses, and examples of personal or political expenditures that are not allowable in B, number 3. That reads, for the record, not allowable expenditures, travel expenditures for individuals who are not government employees, including but not limited to airline tickets, hotel accommodations, etc. You see that? Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
All right. So, and have you seen OPA's audit report of the government's travel policy?
I did.
And they're finding that first class and business class travel has actually happened.
Yes.
Okay. And is finance taking any steps at this point
Yes.
to correct this issue? Could you talk a little bit more about that?
Yes, I've been waiting for the OPA travel audit to be completed so that I can submit my travel regulations to the AG for review and publication. As soon as the OPA travel audit was completed and reviewed with my office, with myself, we proceeded in ensuring and making sure the OPA's recommendations are addressed in our new travel regulations, which should be or will be published by the end of the month.
Oh, that's great. Thank you for that update. My final question is just to verify who at finance is responsible for reviewing government travel?
My director for finance and accounting, who oversees the travel section,
And who is that?
that's Miss Bernie Palacios.
Bernie Palacios. And so she oversees travel as well as reimbursements?
That's correct.
And who oversees official representation?
Her office will as well.
And what about utilities expenses for officials?
Likewise.
Okay. And last question, I promise. So the governor and the lieutenant governor, for these past number of years, have also been getting their utilities at their private residences paid for by the government. Do you know on what authority, what basis that is actually happening?
Yes, it was a practice since a couple governors passed and lieutenant governors. In lieu of paying for their, in lieu of the governor's residence and the lieutenant governor's residence, in fact, including the both presiding officers of this House and the Senate are afforded residence paid for by the government, as well as their utilities and expenses for the House residents.
Okay, so it's just a practice, but there really isn't.
There is a law.
Well, the law says if they live in a government house, then their government utilities in that government house would be included among the expenses that the government would cover, right? But there isn't a law that says that if they live in their own house, their own private residence, that taxpayers should pay for that. I'm just establishing that for the record. And also just for the record, Mr. Secretary, Title 70, same page, page 5, unallowable expenses include expenses for private individuals' utilities. So, Mr. Secretary and colleagues, please take note of that as well.
Thank you, Rep. Sablan.
I yield. Thank you.
Thank you, members. Is there anyone for the final before we excuse the Secretary of Finance? None? Mr. Secretary, thank you for affording your time to the committee to answer questions. Hopefully that clears it up. Should we request your presence back, please make yourself available. Thank you.
Thank you.
Short recess while we excuse the Secretary of Finance. Thank you, members, and we're back. Any other, I guess, going back to new business, is there anything that we need to clear out? I believe we received documents, and you all should receive it by now from IPI. We're still waiting on Triple B, and that's pretty much what I have to give you guys for update. I believe every member has. Rep. Mangalia?
Nothing from mayors or DPS?
I believe DPS submitted, and you should have copies. I believe my staff made copies for everyone. The mayor of the Northern Island, I believe, hasn't. They did. So they did submit. If your office hasn't received copies, let me know, and we'll send it over again.
Chairman, also, just to state for the record that I did reach out to you that the Commissioner of DPS didn't receive the subpoena for documents, and I did reach out to you, and you heard him from my phone.
Yes, and
so I just want to state that for the record.
yes, he did mention he did call last couple of weeks ago. Obviously, there was a mix-up between DMV and his office, so he did submit documents, and I believe everyone should have that copy now. From all the lists that we have in our agenda, it's only Triple B that has not replied yet. And with that, members, is there any other questions, concerns, or anything with regards to new business before we move on to miscellaneous?
Just on the point of clarification from you, Mr. Chairman, that we have yet to receive from Triple B. So what is the course of action of this August body? Should we subpoena, or are we going to give them another extension?
I believe we gave them 10 days, so I'm not sure if that 10 days have lapsed yet. Normally, after the 10th day, we convene and issue the vote on the subpoena.
So clarified. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Rep. Babauta, you have any concerns? No? You okay? Rep. Sablan?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. I do want to ask if we are already at the point of lining up witnesses to call in next. so that we can just keep this going and keep it we're at a pretty good pace now, but in terms of next steps, are we already at the point of identifying the witnesses to call in next? I think, I mean, it sounds to me like Ms. Bernie Palacios from Finance would be a helpful witness to call in to clarify some of these questions. And as the additional records that we requested from these different agencies and companies come in, then we can begin to call in those witnesses that would be most relevant. But I'd like to just get some insight from you and from the members here about what next steps we're looking at.
Thank you, Rep. Sablon. For now, I believe we have to digest all the information that's given to us, and then we'll move forward. Obviously, everyone's leading up to the travel section to be summoned, but to them we'll have to review the travel documents with what we have, and then I'll leave it to the members when we should get back together. Is that clear?
Sure. And in terms of this issue, this lingering issue of the credit card numbers, we've already established from the witnesses that we have called in thus far, including the Secretary of Finance, that there is nobody in the government, it seems, who could really verify who the names are on these 17 different credit cards that have been identified in at least the unredacted versions that are circulating that we have in the House record. And so I want to reiterate my call again to issue a subpoena ducis tecum to the governor and ask him to verify that these 17 credit card numbers are in fact his.
Thank you, Rep. Sablon, and we'll keep that as a note. I think something will have to be discussed in a meeting with all the members present.
Do we not have that meeting now, Mr. Chairman?
Well, just on what we basically it's only on what we have on the agenda, so I would have to include that. I just want to go over my boundary.
Okay. This is under new business.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. And so I would like to make that motion at this time.
Before I
Mr. Chairman.
recognize that motion, let me open it up to
You know, we knew since the very beginning that we weren't gonna get any names, even if it's unredacted, even if it's the 4-digit of the last credit card. We knew since the start. This is just we keep asking all the witnesses that came before us, but even if it's unredacted, we weren't ever going to find that information of the person's credit card. We knew that since the beginning. So now you want to subpoena the governor's credit cards? I don't know.
May I respond?
you, Rep. Sablon.
So the question that we would be seeking to answer is, did the governor use only his own credit cards for all these different reimbursements? It is unusual, highly unusual, as we have said many times in this chamber, for anybody to have 17 credit cards. And so if these were the governor's, we should assume that all of these credit cards are actually his. But if they are not, then this goes to the question of the government's policy and whether it is legal and allowable for any government official to be reimbursed for expenses that he or she did not actually pay for. And so the only person, floor leader is right, the only person who could really answer that would be the governor himself. He submitted all of these different expenses himself for reimbursement, and he got reimbursed for them. And we've gone through just a sampling of the highly questionable expenses. They were charged, they were reimbursed, they were paid for by the CNMI government, 17 different credit cards. If they were not his, then whose were they? But at this point, we know that finance can't tell us whose credit cards they were. We know from the unredacted records that at least 17 different credit cards were used. So whose names are on those cards? If it's the governor's, fine. And then we can get to the question of whether these were legitimate public purposes. But if other people were paying for these expenses and the governor was getting reimbursed for it, then that's another question to pose to the governor himself. At this point, he's the only person who can answer that. And I am suggesting that we issue for now a subpoena ducis tecum. We can call him in. He's already said he's willing to answer questions. He has stated that on the record. He's willing to answer any of our questions. This is a legitimate one.
Thank
And
you,
we should
Epsilon.
ask that right now.
Okay, so what I'm getting at now is because a lot of the reimbursement is handled by Ms. Bernie Palacios. So before I even go that far and asking the governor to come, maybe some bringing in Ms. Bernie, since she was the signatory in majority of the reimbursements that I've seen so far and what was turned in, and that one we can ask her before asking. So I'm gonna assume the governor would have 17 credit cards until it's proven otherwise. I'm not gonna doubt that, but I would ask the members and what they think. Rep. Castro.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My apologies during that whole discussion where the floor leader was discussing what was suggested to the body here. Listening to everything that's gone on over the last couple of meetings, I hold it in faith that the witnesses are trying their best to answer the questions as best as they could. But there always seems to be certain things where they can't answer it, or it's just a little bit, a little bit above the ladder that they're on right now. I know, excuse me, the secretary did mention that there's certain documents that he, wasn't aware of, if I'm using the terminology correctly. So one of the suggestions was to call in the FNA director that works with him. So if that's a viable solution to try to get answers to questions that he wasn't able to answer, then okay, let's do that. But there's a reason why this committee was put together, and the issue that Rep. Sablan did put up is a very viable one. How can we get the information that we need, and it's been redacted? We kind of need to just make sure that whatever stones are there that we have to overturn, we do that. So, if it goes with the line of, the line of answers that the governor has given, where he's not afraid, that he's willing to answer what's going to be presented to him, then we should entertain that as well. If both of those suggestions are viable to completing our work, then, Mr. Chairman, I feel we have to do it. I yield.
Thank you, Rep. Castro. Vice.
Thank you, Chair. I do support your suggestion, calling in Ms. Palacios. Let us give her the opportunity, because she is the first hand that receives a request for reimbursements. And if reimbursement is based by credit cards, and I recommend that we do call her in first, and then if she's not able to provide or give us the answers to our questions, then the ultimatum would to call in the governor. I do support that suggestion, Chairman. Let's start from the lower echelon and going up to the commander-in-chief as a, for the main course. Chairman, are you?
Thank you, Chair. Vice. Is there any other? And I believe the person that submits the reimbursement also should, we can verify through that person. Obviously, there's an assistant that compiles the reports and then submits it in for reimbursement. So that's my suggestion.
If I may, Mr. Chairman. So my motion still stands, and if I'm hearing the members who have weighed in, they would support issuing a subpoena ducis tecum to the governor to verify that these are all his 17 credit cards after we hear from Ms. Bernie Palacios, and it sounds like you also want to hear from the governor's staffer who actually submitted these reimbursement requests to finance.
Yeah, it looks like it's only one person that's writing all the, it looks like it's the same handwriting so far of what I've seen. So yes,
Okay.
that's my recommendation, and I think the committee should stand behind and go that route.
Okay, so once we call in Ms. Bernie Palacios and the individual at the governor's office who submitted these reimbursements, once we call them in, and if they say we cannot verify the names on these credit cards, then we should immediately issue that subpoena ducis tecum.
Then the vote will be laid on the floor, and we will vote on it.
Thank you. So when will we call in Ms. Bernie Palacios and the assistant?
We will schedule it.
Are we scheduling that now?
We'll be scheduling it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Chair.
Thank you.
Thank you. Vice?
Yeah, I would also recommend that we call the Secretary of Finance alone. And, there's a lot of things that he wasn't aware because he just got on board. But according to our line of questions today, it seems like it may be a good opportunity for the Secretary of Finance to be with Ms. Palacios. I take it as an opportunity to familiarize with accountability of public funds and documents that can be redacted, information that cannot be redacted, as I suggested. It's very clear that these folks need training on redaction laws and subpoena procedures, specifically, and most importantly, the handling of documents, safeguarding documents, preserving documents, because these documents eventually, it would be asked in the future. If there's such a court case, and you need those informations, but heck, we found out that it's been redacted and no alternative copies were preserved or safeguarded. I believe that we call in the secretary, it would be a good opportunity for him to learn more about their finance procedures. My suggestion, Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you, Vice. And now, just for the members, I would schedule it and see what their schedule's like, and we'll get someone from the travel section and whoever that does the submission to finance and accounting, and then we'll go from there. Now that's where. Okay. Is there another? Is that fair enough? So with that, is there any other questions, concerns under miscellaneous before we adjourn?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, one more. Just as we're setting up for the next round of hearings with these other witnesses, I'd like to request that our legal counsel draft the subpoena ducis tecum for the governor's credit cards and have that ready for our next hearing to deliberate on.
So noted. Yes, Rep. Castro.
In regards to that subpoena duces tecum, just kind of wanted to ask, aside from asking for the governor himself to provide that information, possible also try to reach out to those institutions that the cards are under, just in case. I mean, if that's legally possible, sufficient.
Thank you, Rep. Castro.
Perhaps we can have our council research that.
I'm sure we can request for that information. It takes time. We don't have that time. Rep.
Under miscellaneous, Mr. Chairman, thank you. What is the course of action of the body with regards to the documents we just received from Department of Public Safety, the Mayor of Northern Islands? So I'm assuming that you're going to allow us to review these documents, and then perhaps if there's a need to subpoena these witnesses to come and answer questions that this August body might have, that will be done on a later date. Is that
That's correct.
correct? Thank you.
So I'm going to give the members a week to review the information. It's quite a lot. I believe we even have the information from IPI, which you should receive by now, and that would take time. We need to verify, and I believe we're still waiting on CCC's submittal. I believe they are submitting. Triple B hasn't responded yet, and if that once the date expires, then we'll come together and vote on the proper process. Okay. With that, members, thank you, and with no further questions, I move that we adjourn until a week from today, where I will schedule and I guess for you guys to review the information that's been submitted. Thank you.